Good morning, good morning, good morning, friends. Welcome to the Stack Shack Sports Show. We have been blessed. That's really all I can say. We have been blessed with two incredible games to start this conference championship playoffs. I honestly I cannot remember a better first two games. I really can't. And so we got to talk about them. We got to discuss them. What does this mean for the playoffs moving forward? What are the predictions? Obviously, both games went into overtime. So, does a certain team have an edge in this situation? Obviously, the winning team's up 1-0, but how much is that going to affect the rest of the series? Obviously, these series are pretty close. Let's start with the first game that happened a couple days ago. The San Antonio Spurs get a big win over the Oklahoma City Thunder and flip that home court advantage that the Thunder had as being the higher seed. Thunder kind of come back a bit. We had two comebacks, obviously one much greater than the other, but a good comeback from the Thunder leads to a tie game, which leads to overtime 1, which leads to overtime 2. Fourth quarter comeback from OKC. Obviously, we've all seen the shot from Wemby from the logo to tie the game. Ultimately ended up, sending it into the first overtime. We go overtime 1, we go overtime 2. Overtime 2, San Antonio pulls away and gets the victory. A truly legendary night from Victor Wembanyama. 41 points, 24 rebounds, 3 blocks. The man is unstoppable. On our friend SGA's MVP night. Now, SGA went for 24, had 12 assists. Pretty good night for him as well, but a minus 15 when he's on the floor was not great. He was only 7 for 23 shooting field goals. It's tough if you are OKC and SGA. I understand a little bit of why SGA got the MVP that night, right? He voted on. I can see why some voters voted him over a Wembanyama, over a Jokic. Wemby, I think, to be fair, did probably not play enough minutes during the season. And so we kind of saw, hey, this is a player. He's incredibly dominant when he's on the floor, but he doesn't play very many minutes. He's definitely not leading the team in usage or being really used to his full potential. Why I was excited to see him in the playoffs, because I knew, okay, playoffs, these people we need. If you're the Spurs, you got to win the games, right? There's no resting or load management in the playoffs. You play if you're able to play. I mean, we've seen that already. People coming back from injuries, etc. You got to lock in. They're going to play Wemby. We're going to see what he can do. What happens when Wemby plays 50 minutes? Now, obviously, this is an overtime game. He wouldn't have gotten there if he didn't play double overtime. But still, what happens when he's one of the most played players on your team? Well, you get 41 and 24, I guess is our resounding answer. He proved tonight that SGA is not the best player in the league, is realistically probably not the most valuable player in the league. In fact, plus minus would suggest that maybe this OKC's a little better with him off the floor. Is he really helping a lot? He actually has, I think, one of the worst playoff plus minuses. I mean, it's not looking great for him as an MVP candidate. Wemby showed up and said, hey, you may have won the MVP, but I am the best player. I am the most dominant. The issue with SGA is in the playoffs so far, a couple things have happened. Number one, they allow a little more contact. This happens every single year. They allow a little more contact in the playoffs. So he's not getting to the free throw line as much. Maybe even, and also probably taking a bit more contact trying to get to the free throw line. So you look at his free throw numbers, dropped quite tremendously coming in now to the playoffs. And his shooting percentage has also plummeted. Now, part of that is he's not getting as many calls as he used to. He's maybe not getting as many shots. Defenses actually play defense, right? Teams actually play legit defense. They put in effort on defense in the playoffs. In the regular season, and again, this is a problem with both baseball and basketball, and I would say hockey even to an extent as well, although hockey is a little lower scoring, so, maybe not. But the games don't matter as much. Obviously, you want to win them. You want to have good seeds, etc. during the regular season. You want to be successful. But there's certain aspects of the game that just do not get the effort that they do in the playoffs. Chet going 8 points. I mean, Wemby kind of shut him down, right? When was the last time Chet had only 8 points, 8 rebounds on 2 of 7 shooting? Jalen Williams back? Kind of. Good for them to have him back. I'm happy to see him back on the floor, but he's not obviously 100% in any way. He only played 10 minutes. Caruso ended up being your best player on the night. 31 points, 11 for 19, 8 for 14. I mean, Caruso's not going to give you 8 3-pointers every night. That you just can't count on that. And these are the kinds of games where you say, okay, SGA, you need to take over. And you really, it's your best player needs to take over. This has been, this was a complaint against LeBron, maybe with the Heatles. Ironically, in a game against the Dallas Mavericks, who just let go of their coach. But you're the best player on the team. You got to play like it. You got to take over. You got to be a commanding presence. You got to go for it. And Wemby, I said this a couple weeks ago in that game against the T-Wolves, where I said Wemby took over in the fourth quarter. And that was that game where he had a little bit of foul trouble, if you'll remember. He jumped in and dominated the game and demonstrated that he is, it's fair to say, I think at this point, he is the best player in the NBA right now. How historic can he be, I think, is really the question that we're all asking. As far as this series goes, before we jump into maybe a little discussion about that, I think this was one of the easiest bets I've ever made in my life for Spurs to win the series. I didn't particularly pick a specific number of games. I'm not sure. Obviously, this went into double overtime. These teams are fairly evenly matched. I'm not saying OKC is terrible. But when you look at the matchups in this series, it's pretty clear to me that the Spurs have a major advantage. So let's just walk through this. What is OKC really good at? Well, they have SGA, a great guard, who gets to the free throw line a lot, good in the mid-range, theoretically fairly good around the basket. They have great defense from Dort, Caruso, etc. Elite defense. Chet as well. So Chet was runner-up, I think, on Defensive Player of the Year. So you've got great defense, a really good guard, and then you have Chet, who's kind of, a physical specimen, right? Well, the San Antonio Spurs kind of match up against them perfectly. Similar to actually how we said last series, hey, Timberwolves actually kind of match up well against the Spurs. They have good three-point shooting. They've got, a defensive presence of a big man in Rudy Gobert inside. Maybe he can help, at least not give up quite so many rebounds to Wemby from a size perspective. He can at least compete. Timberwolves might match up okay against the Spurs. I actually don't think the Timberwolves would match up very well against the Thunder. I don't think Rudy would have to get stretched. Chet would stretch him out of the lane, cause some issues. San Antonio feels to me almost built to beat OKC. They have incredible defensive guards. Castle and Harper, the rookie. Oh my goodness. I mean, can we say more? This is what's real scary about the Spurs when we talk about their long-term future. Harper, Castle, Wemby is a terrifying trio, and they're all super young. I think they're all 22 or younger, right? These are kids coming into the league right now. They have great defensive guards that are going to make things difficult for OKC, specifically SGA, who likes to be in the mid-range, obviously likes to be finishing around the basket. Not a particularly great three-point shooter. OKC is not a particularly great three-point shooting team overall. And then you have Wemby. Wemby is absolutely dominant in the lane defensively. The best way, and I know I saw some stuff online talking about the Warriors and Steph Curry, but realistically, Steph Curry is kind of the model for how you can try and beat/compete with Wemby. You need somebody, and really, it's not even you need somebody. You need multiple people that are elite shooters to pull him away from the basket. If he is allowed to just sit near the basket and rotate around the key, watching for mid-range jumpers, you're never going to get a good look. He is that dominant in the lane. He's that long. You have to stretch him out to the three-point line to clear the lane to have an opportunity to get to the basket. That is kind of the formula for having a chance against Wemby. It's why Steph Curry has scored so many points against the Spurs in his career, especially recently, right? That is the way to beat him. I don't know if it's not going to always be successful. It's not a full kryptonite like, Wemby's useless if you've got a lot of shooters. But that is just mechanically how you beat a team with an incredibly dominant big in the lane. You get him out of the lane. Because you can't just sit there and shoot threes all day. You shoot them at too low of a percentage. You want to be able to get some nice, easy baskets. Sometimes you need a bucket, right? And you got to be able to force him out of the lane. OKC can't really do that. We look at OKC's shooting numbers. Jay was 2 of 7 from three-point lane. That's not going to cut it. Alex Caruso shot incredibly well from 3. He just didn't get any help. I mean, Aaron Wiggins 0 for 3. Lou Dort 1 for 5. Chet was 2 for 4, but I mean, he only just look at these stats here. He's 2 for 7. He couldn't do anything. in the lane. He couldn't do anything in the mid-range. He was relegated to shooting a couple of threes. And if you can relegate Chet, who's arguably their second best scorer. I said Jalen Williams earlier. I meant this Jalen Williams. I know, it's confusing. Him being back, that was my mix-up. My bad. Him being back is big. Shot a lot of shots. But we talk about the big three: Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Jalen, I would say, for coming off of injury, there it is. That's what you can expect. That's a good night for Jalen. Chet and Shai, Shai got 24 points, but on 7 of 23. That's not great. And Chet just disappeared. Why? Wemby's there. And Wemby can guard Chet outside, inside, in the mid-range, wherever. Look at the Spurs' big three. Wemby, Harper, Castle. It's not incredible, but Wemby's incredibly dominant. They got some good help from Vassell. Realistically, the person who's not on here is De'Aaron Fox. He's really part of their big three. So the fact that they were able to get a win with no De'Aaron Fox, I think bodes very well for the Spurs. They match up very well against the Thunder. They can hang with them defensively. There's nobody you can SGA can't pick a guy and go at him. Everybody here is capable on defense. Especially from a guard perspective. Harper and Castle, absolutely fantastic. Shout out Harper. He's been incredible this playoffs. Rookie, one of the best rookies I've seen, over the years, as far as this good, this young it's very impressive, especially as a guard. Sometimes a big man can be somewhat dominant, but as a guard, oh my goodness. Yeah. Plus 14, plus minus. He was fantastic. He really, really was. Castle, obviously more of a defensive guy, but shooting okay. Not great, but enough. And you get a little help from Champagnie. And Vassell played well, as another player. Harper, again, I can't say enough about him. Coming in, Fox hurt, not playing, kind of thrust into this position, and he was very good. He was. He just flat out was. Wemby's the story, though. So, just briefly, we'll discuss Wemby's potential here. Let's have this discussion, because that's what everybody wants to talk about. Are we witnessing the greatest basketball player of all time? Potentially. I think that's the answer from everybody. And if you were already saying he's the best ever, I don't know what to tell you. You're slightly delusional. We got to see a little bit more. Let's let him get one ring first before we crown him the best player of all time. But he's definitely capable of doing it. And you see the passion which he plays with. You see the way his teammates seem to love playing with him. The true dominance, the ability to take over a game, the ability to just do things that we've never seen before. That he really does do things that, to be honest, are impossible for some people to do. Nobody's ever been this tall, this good of a ball handler, right? This dominant defensively, all at the same time, all at this age. So where is his ceiling? Where does this go? To me, he can make the LeBron Michael Jordan discussion about the GOAT completely irrelevant if he stays healthy. And we might be able to put a caveat there of also, he needs at least Harper or Castle to stay healthy as well. But, I think theoretically you could move some other pieces around and and keep him having a running mate. Obviously, this is a team game. You can't just win it by yourself. You need some help. But they have this young core that is so dominant at such an early age, and they're having so much success. Wemby could be the greatest of all time. There is one if, and this is the thing that I think everybody is hoping and praying for. I think if you are a basketball fan, you're hoping for this. Obviously, when you're playing Wemby, you don't want him on the floor, but nobody would wish an injury on somebody. He's a great player, and we don't want to see him hurt. But that is the one question. He is incredibly tall, and typically, a player that tall, that long, not particularly thick, but again, who is particularly thick when you're that tall? Players of that size historically have had some injury problems, and Wemby has already, we've had some kind of load management stuff during the season, some injury concerns at different moments. We don't want to see him hurt. And if he stays healthy, if it's possible for him to stay healthy, I think we're looking at probably the future greatest of all time. I think the league is in a position where a Spurs dynasty is possible, and with some good competition as well, which will help his resume, because it'll be like, wow, he beat, he keeps coming out of the West when the West has got Jokic and SGA and the Thunder and Edwards and Minnesota, right? Like, you could go down the list. There's some good teams in the West. The West is deep. If Wemby keeps coming out of that, if he stays healthy, if he stays as dominant as he has been so far, we're looking at the greatest of all time. If he starts getting hurt, we'll have an issue, obviously. We might be looking at a Joel Embiid type situation where you go, wow, I mean, when he was healthy and on, he was incredible, but he's not healthy consistently. And so I wish the best for Wemby. I would love to see him stay healthy, because it is incredible to watch him play basketball. Even, I'm not a Spurs fan. I think it's pretty obvious if you've watched this channel. I'm a bit of a Warriors fan. I obviously don't want to see Wemby out there dominating the West. I'd like the Warriors. I want Curry to get another ring, but Wemby has that potential. If he stays healthy, he becomes the greatest of all time. We should have a greatest of all time discussion, by the way, sometimes. So let's talk about the next game. The game of last night. Our second game 1 overtime. This series, I'd pick the Knicks. I think most people picked the Knicks. Ironically, most people did not pick the Spurs. They were, I think, a 3-1, almost 4-1 underdog on Kalshi before the series started. So Cavs, Knicks. Knicks, I think we all expected to win. It's game 1 at home. Cavs had to come off of, a emotional series against Pistons. Knicks didn't have to worry too much. They're coming off of rest. We saw what happened to OKC. It looked a little slow coming out against the Spurs. Spurs kind of jumped out to a lead. Did not really happen. First quarter, Knicks got a 7-point lead after the first quarter. They're looking pretty good. Then they end up going down. I think the biggest margin was 22 at one point. Come absolutely storming back to end the game. send it to overtime, and retain home court advantage. It was immensely impressive. Absolutely stunning from the Knicks to come back. It also is a little telling of a classic Cleveland scenario. Let's look at the box score. And let's once again look at our friend James Harden. 5 of 16, 6 turnovers. You don't really need to say much more. This is classic James Harden. This is now, not a statistical anomaly. I'm not saying he's a terrible player. I'm not saying that he can't have great games. But 25% of the time in the playoffs, and he's played in a lot of playoff games at this point. We have a sample size. This is not one series. 25% of the time, actually a little over, in his career, James Harden has more turnovers than made field goals. That is not how you win playoff basketball. More turnovers, 6, than made field goals, 25% of the time. That's just not going to be winning basketball. Honestly, Donovan Mitchell didn't play bad. 12 of 23, 30 points. His plus minus isn't great, but, that is what it is. Evan Mobley didn't even play bad. He oftentimes is, kind of my barometer for how the Cavs are going to do. If he gets, double-digit points and rebounds, normally that's a pretty good game for the Cavs, and they're in a good position. But Schroeder was 1 for 9. That's not great. 3 points. And Strus only 8 points. You're expecting Harden, big three, Harden, Mitchell, Mobley. You need Harden to do something. And 5 made field goals and 6 turnovers is not going to win. Knicks, Brunson was fantastic down the stretch. Truly amazing down the stretch. The depth that you could see here, very good for the Knicks. Very good for the Knicks. You got 5 guys here in double digits. That's winning basketball, right? Again, let's go through the list here. Brunson, as our lead scorers here. Brunson and Bridges, they're making more field goals than turnovers. Now, Anthony, but he's very efficient here. Just under 50%. James Harden, under 30% shooting. He just, only took 14 shots. He did have 7 turnovers, but it is what it is. OG coming back. This is big for the Knicks. I didn't have an incredible game, but got to the line a decent amount and played some good defense. This, to me, felt like the Cavs did Cavs things again. I just don't trust them. The Pistons didn't have enough offense, right? That's really what it came down to in that series, in my opinion, is the Pistons just did not have the offense that they needed. And so the Cavs, who can score, just were able to outscore the Pistons and overcome a good Pistons defense. Don't get me wrong. But the Knicks have an offense and they have a defense. They're not one dimensional. It's not, we just looked. There's 5 players with double digits points. The Pistons aren't doing that. It's Cade Cunningham, and can he get some help, hopefully? So Cavs run into a Knicks team, and to be honest, when they're up by 22, we're thinking, hey, this is a big moment for the Cavs. They're actually showing up in a big game on the road, can steal home court advantage, steal game 1 from the Knicks in the Garden. This is a massive moment. And the Knicks came storming back. We said this a couple series ago. Go watch the videos when I said the Knicks had that really impressive win. You can go find it. I asked the question, was this the most impressive win of the playoffs? In that they got down, they didn't give up, they clawed their way back and won a game. And that was also a game that, it didn't feel like a must win. It was a game you could have rollen over. But they didn't. They weathered the storm, they bounced back, they battled back, and they got the win and went on to win that series very easily. This felt similar. Down big, massive comeback at home, retain home court advantage, and get the win. Not saying this is going to be a sweep. I honestly don't think it probably will be, because Harden does that 25% of the time, but the other, 75% of the time, he's got some serious success. It's just, you can't, essentially you're saying we're going to lose 25% of our games, because 25% of the time Harden is going to be absolutely atrocious. And that's not a winning formula. To me, this feels like they sucked the life out of Cleveland. Cleveland had this hope, and they just fell apart, and I don't know where they go from here. Game 2 will be very interesting. We'll see what kind of fight Cleveland has. They went down 2-0 in the last series, and we thought they were done, and they came back. But they had a moment here. They had a chance. It felt like they had a chance to say, nah, this series is going to be interesting. You're going to have to fight tooth and nail. And then they just collapsed and let it slip away. And that does not bode well for them for the rest of the series. That's my thoughts on these 2 games. If it does become Knicks Spurs, we'll talk about that later. I think the Knicks match up okay, but I don't think any team... realistically, I don't think it matters, Spurs or OKC. I think they're definitely going to be the favorite in that series, regardless of what it comes out to. So that's NBA. The next thing I want to talk about, I'm going to get it pulled up here, just briefly to end the show today. We've had an interesting few developments recently in the world of fight sports. And let me pull up some... let me pull up the card here. Okay. Thanks everybody for hanging out. It's been fun this morning. I think I'm gonna try and do this more consistently each morning. So set your calendars, subscribe, hit that bell, and we'll see you every morning, hopefully during the week, for a stream. So, if you didn't see it, Netflix has been getting into the live sports arena. They're using MVP promotions. Jake Paul and those business partners are really pushing this. They have a good working relationship with Netflix. And Netflix wants to get into live sports. I don't blame them. Live sports is kind of the only thing that players, or I should say, viewers, it's the only thing that viewers consistently watch live. Even network TV at this point, it's streaming, it's watch it later, it's, it comes out tonight, maybe they'll watch it within the first few minutes, but people aren't necessarily, even with the big shows that are on, NBC or ABC, CBS at night, they're not really watching those live. They're then going to Paramount Plus or Peacock or name your streaming system and watching them after they've come out. Sports is kind of the one outlier to that. People will still get in front of a TV live to watch sports, and there's a lot of advantageous aspects to having live viewership as far as advertising and spend and how long you can get people to sit in front of a TV for and pay attention and all of these different things. So they're getting into live sports. I think it's great, honestly. Competition is good. And this was their first attempt at an MMA event. So they got kind of an interesting card here. Rousey Carano being the headliner main fight. None of these were necessarily for belts. But they were real fights. I will say that. They were definitely real fights. To give a little backstory, the UFC kind of has a monopoly, right, on MMA right now. And they're trying to get it in boxing. And there's, kind of two schools of thought. On one hand, you have the UFC model, and on the other, you have kind of more the traditional boxing model. The traditional boxing model gets people paid more money. But arguably, it also gets less total people paid real money, if that makes sense. So you kind of have a situation on the boxing side where, you got to be your own promoter to an extent. I'm not saying literally your own promoter, but you got to promote yourself, build enough of a following to sell a big fight. You got to know how to sell your own big fights. Because there are so many promoters, because there are multiple belts, different, WBC, et cetera, there is competition. So the best fighters, the most popular fighters, the Mayweathers, the Canelos, Tyson Furies, Deontay Wilder. We got 3 of those matchups between him and Fury. These players of recent memory, these fighters, they're able to shop around a little bit, get kind of the most advantageous fight because the promoter wants to have one of them as the headliners. That way, they can sell the full card, right? You get a great headliner, people will buy the card, and then you fill it with what you hope will be good fights, with fighters that can, start building a reputation because, oh yeah, I remember that guy. He fought on the, the Canelo card. Oh yeah, I remember. I watched the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, and this guy was on the undercard. I remember that guy. I'll check it out. And hopefully they can build and have some great moments in that card that then, makes the next Mayweather, the next Canelo, the next Fury, the next, etc. That's one way of doing it. And it's worked for a very long time, but it definitely skews towards paying a smaller number of people a much larger amount of money. And to be fair, I want to be very clear. We need to make sure these fighters are paid as much as possible. What they're doing is incredibly dangerous. And it's not something you can do, day in, day out for decades and decades. rarely are seeing, you're not having the 40-year career, right? This is not a normal job. So that window of opportunity to really get paid, you got to maximize it. And boxing kind of allows that. UFC, they do it a little differently because there's not really a competition. Yes, there's the PFL. There are other places you can fight UFC or MMA, but MMA and UFC is kind of synonymous as, Bellator, etc. You can go around. These other leagues, for the most part, kind of feel like AAA. AAA baseball. You're not in the majors. You got to get to the UFC if you want the real fights. We don't look at, the PFL belt the same way we look at a UFC belt. We don't look at those other leagues. Unlike boxing, where you can have a couple of different belts, we talk about the unified belts where somebody has all of them. That's obviously more impressive, but different belts have some level of, mystique and recognition that is somewhat equal. We might say we think a fighter's better than another, but we don't necessarily discredit a specific belt. Or shall we say maybe even in the reverse of that, we don't credit a specific belt the way we do over in MMA with the UFC belts. What the UFC allows, though, is more fighters getting paid something. A UFC contract comes with quite a few nice guarantees. You're not reliant necessarily on promoting yourself. The UFC is going to kind of just do it. Obviously, the people that are going to make the most money and be the most popular, you got to promote yourself in the fight sport. That's just a thing. But you don't have to go find your own promoter or, shop around. You just get placed on cards. You sign a contract for a certain number of fights. There's a level of consistency there that you can know will be there. And from a fan perspective, there's a certain level of understanding when it's a UFC card that there's going to be a certain level of quality is kind of the idea. And that's the reputation that UFC has built. And that's how they sell their cards. They don't necessarily need Mayweather to be on every card to sell, huge pay-per-view. Now, again, UFC moves away from pay-per-view recently with this deal with Paramount. Lot of discussions about fighter pay recently, especially with Dana, CEO of the UFC, looking him business partners. They're getting into boxing, wanting to try and kind of do the same thing. Boxing fans are understandably worried about fighter pay and having a monopoly and on all of these things. What will it do? So here comes MVP Promotions. Jake Paul has, love him or hate him, you have to respect that he has done a pretty good job promoting fights in boxing. Are some of them very much Mickey Mouse fights? Are they good fights? I don't know, but he does get people to watch. He found a partner in Netflix that is hungry for the content, and he's promoting it to them. So MVP comes along and says, hey, and if you watch the card and you hear Jake Paul talk about it after, he just kept reiterating, he's like, we are showing that we can compete with the UFC. We want to compete with the UFC. We want to give fighters another option, a better option where we're going to take care of them, fighter pay, fighter health, etc., etc., etc. That was the pitch. That's the pitch from Jake Paul and his, promotion team and, business partners and whatnot. The question is, Did they? Did they put on a product that competes with the UFC? The answer is not even close. And I say this in a little bit of, an unfortunate situation here, but like, I would like there to be some competition. I think anytime there's competition, it forces people to improve. It works out better for fight fans, I think. It works out better for fighters too, right? But we've seen the numbers as far as pay has come out. Nobody's really making more money than UFC, necessarily. It's a bit of a, this is supposed to be a bit of a super card. Let's be honest here. We have some names, Junior De Los Santos, Francis Ngannou, Nate Diaz and Mike Perry, Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano. I mean, these two are huge stars. Huge stars. But I will say, watching this main card, and, I didn't actually get a chance to watch as much of the undercard on this one as normally I do. But, this is a super fight. A main card supposed to be incredible. I'm looking here. This fight was, I'd argue, slightly tough to watch. I mean, Junior Dos Santos is incredibly old at this point. This fight, we had 4 straight knockouts, 5 straight. I think we had 5 straight submission or finishes, right? Multiple of which came in the first round. And what is that a sign of? When fights end that quickly, it is one of two things, typically. Number one, somebody got real lucky. You just caught him on an unfortunate punch or a kick or something. The other option is it is a completely lopsided matchup where one fighter is just infinitely better than the other. And that's, to me, how most of this card felt. The other thing that I would argue is I think 2 of these fighters, to me, stood out as, I'd actually like to see them in the UFC. And that's Francis Ngannou and Mike Perry. I think Francis Ngannou is probably still capable of being a heavyweight contender. And with the way the UFC is right now, with the heavyweight division, it'd be nice to have him in there as, a real option, with Jon Jones seemingly not being able to come to terms on a fight deal right now. Francis Ngannou would be a great name. And then Mike Perry's just an incredibly violent fighter, and his fights are pretty much always entertaining to some level. And I do think he could compete at welterweight in the UFC. To some extent. Is he belt worthy? Probably not, but maybe. Francis Ngannou looks like he could compete for a belt. He's realistically, to me, the only one that looks like, oh yeah, I think he'd have a serious chance at the belt. But he's fighting Felipe Lins. I gotta go full cam for this. Felipe Lins is not even a heavyweight traditionally. He went up to go fight Ngannou. Realistically, he took a giant chunk of change, much more than he would have been able to get fighting, I believe he's a PFL. You know, I love that they say dangerous and durable. Like, they're prepping you that Ngannou is about to absolutely annihilate this guy. And hopefully he's durable enough to make it, interesting to some extent. No, he didn't. Ngannou beat the crap out of him. Very quickly, very easily. Good for Felipe Lins. He got paid probably more money than he's ever made in his career, and more money than he would ever normally be capable of making. But this guy's not on an Ngannou level. Then we got to the main event of the evening. Rousey Carano. And to me, this continued the trend and the experience that the rest of the card was. Fun in names. Okay on paper. But it felt a little gimmicky. It felt a little Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Like, great. Rousey and Carano. Two really recognizable names. I remember Carano, isn't she in The Mandalorian? And two legends in the female fight space. Let's be honest. Carano, even older. But realistically, we're looking at two women who are long out of their primes, retired for a while at this point from fight sports. And I mean, Carano had to lose 100 pounds, which, great on her. That's super impressive. But that just shows you she's not in like fight shape, in fight mode right now. And it feels like a gimmicky fight. It just did. Ronda did exactly what she did in the UFC for a very long time. And that's submit people really, really, really fast. People complaining about, oh gosh, the fight, the main event took 15 seconds. What's ironic is that is the same complaint that Rousey had, people had against Rousey back in the UFC. I remember a time in the UFC when Rousey was just beating everybody so quickly, submitting everybody so quickly, that people were arguing. They're like, are UFC pay-per-views worth it? Because the fights never last very long. It was kind of this era. McGregor knocked out a couple people in a few seconds. Rousey, is submitting everybody in a few seconds and knocking people out in a few seconds. Do you buy a UFC card anymore? Because you're going to be able to see the whole fight in 15-second highlight. You didn't miss anything. You literally get to see the whole fight in, a 30-second clip. Was that a real concern for the UFC? Are pay-per-views worth it anymore? And what does Rousey do? Exactly the same thing. She submits Gina instantly. And then, Twitter gets mad about, oh man, that was boring. What the fight's already over. We didn't even really get to see a fight. I mean, Gina throws one kick, leg grab, game over, armbar. Hello. Welcome back, Ronda Rousey. But to be honest, that's exactly what we expected to happen. So overall, was this good for the sport? Probably. It is probably good to have some level of a competitor, but these were not interesting fights. If this was a pay-per-view, I I don't think I would have bought it. I have Netflix, so I watched it. It was great. But if they want to compete with the UFC, they got to find a way to actually get some real talent and build it up. Now, I know this is the first one, and they want to do more. And you got to start somewhere. And starting with some big names to get some buzz. I know it pulled a fairly big number. I think if I go back here, 17 million they released. MVP saying 12.4 million. You know, that's a good number. It averaged 12.4 million, it looks like, from the headlines here. You know, that is a good number for a card. You know, maybe we don't really have numbers, I don't think, from the UFC on their most recent cards, but you know, it does get eyes. I do think Netflix's production is very good. It's gotten much better. You know, the days of stuttering are kind of gone for the most part there. But we gotta get some real fights, because you know, we can love Nate Diaz, but he got absolutely annihilated. He looked incredibly tired almost immediately. Ngannou is just in a different, I mean, he's literally in a different weight class normally than Felipe Lins. You need a little bit of excitement and a little bit of a I don't know what's going to happen tonight. I knew Junior Dos Santos was not going to win that fight. He's too old. He's been retired. Like, what are we doing? I knew Ngannou was going to win that fight. You know, it was part of me going, maybe Nate'll, you know, he's a gritty fighter. Maybe he'll have a chance. Mike Perry was always going to win that fight. Rousey Carano, betting Ronda Rousey to submit Carano in the first round probably is one of the easiest predictions you could have made. We knew that was going to happen. Carano's a decent striker, and Rousey historically has not had a great chin. But to think that Gina would ever get off any punches, it's not going to happen. Rousey's just going to take her down, and Gina does not have the takedown defense to defend. So, future of UFC, future of MVP in the MMA. All right, MVP, you did your celebrity card. I mean, that's really what this felt like. It felt like a celebrity boxing card. Not necessarily great top-level fighters. Maybe outside of Ngannou. I think he's the only real top-level fighter. Maybe Mike Perry could compete in a UFC type of situation. But outside of that, nah. You know, it's not like I'm all of a sudden hoping Rousey or Carano jumps over to the UFC and fights for a belt. No. They're not fighting for a belt at featherweight in the UFC. It's not happening. They're not. It's a celebrity fighting. It's a celebrity fight night. That's what this felt like. Now that you've done it, you got your number, you prove that you can pull it off, you prove that you can, you know, get the refs, get the infrastructure, build a... You got the machine moving. You use some big names, some celebrities, essentially, to promote it, to get people to remember, oh yeah, Netflix has fight sports. Sounds good. Now, you're going to need to make a real card with real fighters that really are contenders. The unfortunate part is the UFC has all the contracts. And that is the disappointing thing. If you're a fight fan, that is a bit disappointing. You know, in boxing, we'd be able to get these fights, theoretically, right? You get enough money, you get the right people involved. You can maybe make this happen, but the UFC just has a monopoly on fighters. And it's going to be hard to break that monopoly. Curious, your thoughts down below on both the topics today. What do you think about the NBA playoffs? I think it's pretty clear it's going to be Knicks Spurs finals, but we'll see. Maybe the Cavs, you know, again, they did this kind of last series. It went down 2-0, came roaring back, ended up winning 7. They're definitely a different team at home, so we'll see when we get there. OKC, heart of a champion. Can they bounce back? Can SGA show that he's, a legitimate player? We're going to find out. Is he really an MVP? He's going to have to start playing like one to have any chance of competing against Wemby and the Spurs. And then what do you think about the Spite Sports? I do want to talk, and I think we'll do this maybe tomorrow, about the White House card coming up. And I also want to talk about the UFC and the Paramount and why I think the last few UFC cards have been disappointing on announcement. They've been fantastic, in my opinion, from an actual fight sport, fight fan watching. They've been pretty good. Did we love Charles Oliveira just dominating from a grappling and wrestling perspective? The whole fight in the BMF title recently? Probably not. It's not really what the BMF title is for. But I want to talk about why the cards, I think, have felt a bit underwhelming recently. And this might be the opportunity for MVP to take a little market share and have a chance at building a real competitor. So thanks everybody for hanging out, for stopping by. Those of you that did, we're going to hopefully do this a little more consistently in the mornings here. And it was fun. I appreciate everybody who hung out, and we will see you tomorrow.